I am Jennifer Levine Hartz. I'm the founder and CEO of Corporate Hartz LLC. We have three main lines of business: corporate social responsibility, again, businesses of all sizes, all geographies, with opportunities and challenges that are run the gamut. I do family philanthropy as well, and subject matter expertise sharing.
All right, pretty awesome. And can you tell me a little bit about how you started your business? What led you to jump into business?
So I am not a natural entrepreneur. I am a natural slow and steady wins the race. And then I left my McKinsey job to join a very promising .com, where I ran government relations, employee relations, community relations, investor relations, and community relations. Did I just get them all right?
Yep. Tell me a little bit what you did at McKinsey. What were you doing? So give me an idea of your background and how long you were in what let's call stable employment.
Right. Stable employment from before I even finished college, all the way through the .com era. I was at McKinsey in a couple of different roles. One, just plain old, business analyst kind of consulting. One, I was responsible for the upgrade of a research department because they were no longer librarians. They were actually, the technology was there and their skills needed to be built to be able to do some analysis of the research that they were finding. And that job also. The opening of a Charlotte office. This was all in the Atlanta office. We opened a Charlotte office and a Miami office, and I was a big part of that, getting executives integrated into the people they needed to know in those markets. And I was also the global subject matter expert for pro bono. So anybody who was working on a pro bono project who needed some expertise from the nonprofit perspective, but still in a McKinsey language, I was the guy.
All right. So
I left that for the .com very exciting opportunity, which turned out to be one of the classic boom busts. I was there for 2 years. I ended up with negative salary and a great network, great experience. Still love those people today. Still am collegial with all those folks.
So after the bust, what happens?
So after the bust, what happens is mostly everybody in the tech space is busting, at least for the moment. Some of them survive, and some of them thrive. But a lot of us basically kicked on the streets. At the time, I had just had baby number 3 and was pregnant with baby number 4, which we were unaware of. So it was a very challenging crossroads, both professionally and personally. I was very uncomfortable that my foray into entrepreneurism didn't end well from a financial perspective, ended well in a lot of other perspectives. But I ended up basically hanging a shingle. People heard the company was going away. We were delisted from the NASDAQ. Writing was on the wall. I was one of the last people in the building. And 2 large companies, Deloitte and AT&T, sought out either employing me or asking me to do contract work with them. I thought about the employment for a long time, but then I found out I was pregnant and very pregnant. So I said, no, I don't want to be your employee. I want to be a contractor. And those 2 projects happened. And then other people called and said, we want a project and we want a project. And so
you basically went from very, very stable position with McKinsey
Mhm.
You went into what could be termed as a high growth, high risk company
Yeah,
that looked solid on paper, but I'm sure with
right.
your analytical background, there was always the consideration that this could be a high risk, high reward position.
Yes. Yeah.
Found out you had the baby, so there's definitely circumstance,
Yes.
so, which is one of the reasons we found people wind up going into business. You
Yeah.
got offered some positions. I'm guessing if you really wanted to, there could have been a way to work that around.
I guess so, but our last two children are 11 months apart. The next two up are only 15 months apart, and the top one is only 2 years older. So when I had that fourth baby, the oldest of the four was 4.
Okay, so you had to kind of adjust.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. Right, a lot going on there. One thing I did want to mention is that between the original consulting job and then the more in-depth McKinsey job that I was explaining to you, I worked for the Home Depot, and I helped develop the corporate social responsibility, environmental sustainability, and diversity wellness programs, diversity programs, things like that.
Now, here's what's interesting to me. You what you do has grown,
Yeah.
right? When did you go from contracting to more of what I would call business ownership in a sense?
Mhm. Pretty quickly, because Deloitte was one of my early clients. And I pulled somebody aside one day and I said, so I should make a company or you should pay me. I don't know. And we made a company, and that was Corporate Hearts LLC.
Do you have a team or are you still what I would call a solopreneur?
I am a solopreneur still, but over the years I have a number of groups of colleagues through an organization called Umbrex, which supports certain kinds of consultants on a global level. I have people that I would bring in for expertise that I didn't have or time that I didn't have. And so if somebody wanted a graphic design presentation that was going to whiz bang the CEO, I would hire somebody to do that and deep research. So I have a field of potential subcontractors at any time to do pieces that are better for them to do than me.
Mm-hmm.
And I have colleagues to call in for projects as well. I learned that.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. If I would say you're what I would call a gig economy employer, in a sense.
I guess.
So you do work with other people. You're not
Yes.
purely a solopreneur. You're not like this individual contractor that just does everything on their own. Your
Right.
business is it's bigger than that in
Yes.
that sense.
And I have
So
actually gone into that role for other people. So if a PR firm is working on a CSR opportunity or exposure, they can bring me in as their contractor.
gotcha. All right. Very, very interesting. So now tell me a little bit more about what drives you as an entrepreneur, right? You could have gone back to stable employment, let's call it that, once the, your children got a little bit older, right? So you were pregnant, understandable. You had to. Your
Right.
circumstance meant that really a full-time job wasn't an option. And now time goes by and that's no longer a consideration.
Right.
Why
So,
don't you just go back to looking for a great, awesome, amazing job in corporate America?
because this was awesome. Being my own boss, being an independent contractor, being able to say yes or no to projects, either because of time constraints or my personal level of interest in it, or timing. And that has been what has kept me going, is the flexibility. And we had, it's kind of a long story, but I had plenty of time to work once they were, all walking. Kind of a big bonus there. But we did have help because we worked full-time plus, both my husband and myself.
And if I understand correctly, your husband's also an entrepreneur.
He is an on-purpose entrepreneur.
All right.
I am an accidental entrepreneur.
So, as an accidental entrepreneur, which I think I'm going to have to steal that moniker away from you, for the plain and simple reason that I think you went into entrepreneurship accidentally, but you've had many opportunities to pivot back and you haven't. So I don't think
Right.
you can keep that title as much anymore.
Yeah.
Fully.
Yeah.
I think now you're an intentional one. So
now I stay on purpose. Yeah. And at 2008, there was an opportunity to shift gears.
now,
Everything went.
so part of it is definitely like your autonomy. Now, one thing I know, because we've talked before, is that part of the reason you like having control over that autonomy is also because you're very curious. You love learning and being able to work in different industries. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah.
And how it drives you?
One of the things that's great about being a consultant with a big firm, a medium firm, a small firm, or by yourself is I was raised sort of to be a generalist. I think people now coming out of school and going into grad school or the workforce, they're specializing in the narrow something that we need deep expertise in as a nation. I came out of be a generalist, you can be a utility player, you could be you have your skills transfer to other projects, other jobs. What I've really loved about my practice, both in consulting and on my own, is the variety. I have clients that are chemical manufacturers. I have clients that are retailers, franchisees. It's always huge. I've worked with Hewlett Packard and United Technologies Corporation. I've worked with small companies you've never heard of. And I love the diversity of all of that experience.
Okay. So you're a generalist in terms of industry, but then you're a specialist in terms of the type of
CSR, right. CSR, corporate social responsibility, environment, society, and government, what we call ESG, and family philanthropy.
Now, I'm going to use this moment to actually pivot to another subject that matters at the moment, of course. And that's with all the goings on with COVID. A lot of people are worried about what the future holds and also the stress of the current situation, right? One of the major concerns that people have is that feeling of loss of control, in a sense, right? It's not just that there's something going on, but there's very little you can do to control the moment. Now, with that being said, you mentioned that you were a generalist. Now, this is my take, and I want your opinion on it. Coming out of this, a lot of people, in my opinion, are going to need to retool. I think that generalist stability is going to become more important before we re-specialize. So that time to kind of adapt. And then, yes, we will see what the industry looks like, what future looks like, and so on. But what's your take on that?
I do think that there's going to be a major shift in how people work. I think there's going to be a major shift in what we feel as a society are important industries. And we're going to see a lot of the response coming from the millennials, who are already thinking in so many socially responsible ways, thinking about environmental sustainability, thinking about work-life balance, not wanting a house with a 4-car garage in Johns Creek. So I think all of those things are going to have accelerated acceptance. And to be able to help any industry in any functional area makes me a valuable partner in order to do that.
So your level of generalism, in a sense, the fact that you've worked in different industries will allow you to adapt to the new market conditions a lot faster than if you had a specialist industry.
Right. I do really feel that way. I've worked in every industry. I've been brought into these companies from HR, legal, compliance, CEO, safety, vendor relate. I get brought in a number of different, each time unique ways, which is what makes it fun.
Now, my argument is that in a time when you cannot really control what's going on around you, and you're not sure what to tool up for, soft skills are one of the most important things that you can build. So interpersonal communication, negotiation skills, they're going to be relevant no matter what you do. But the most powerful soft skill there is, and I would actually call it a hard skill, is mastering your own mind, building resilience, and being able to overcome adversity. Which brings me onto a subject that I'm actually covering and I'd like to touch on with you, which is success is forged in the fires of adversity.
Yes.
So what I'd like to know is, if you have an experience where you went through adversity and that strengthened you, taught you something maybe about yourself, about your resilience, or helped you have a mind shift in terms of how you saw the world.
I definitely had a couple of very relevant experiences like what you just said. My .com business that I joined up thinking I would either make a lot of money and go away or stay in it for a long time and build it and grow it. When that didn't happen, that was a moment. And what I did was build from it. Couple people called, I followed up, I charted a path at least to get through a certain period of time. And then I started expanding this geographic scope of where I would work. I've had global clients, I've had local clients.
Now, you call yourself an accidental entrepreneur.
Yes.
I think one key skill set of an entrepreneur is adaptability. And something tells me that you went through the dot-com crash and you pivoted relatively quickly, is my understanding.
Yes, yes.
It tells me that there's something about you that gave you that mindset, and it happened before the dot-com.
Absolutely. That something was a total fear of not bringing home the bacon.
Where does that come from, that fear?
Trick question, CJ. I'm not sure how much this will fit in at all for what you're trying to get out. But the real answer is, when I was a kid, I didn't know if we had money or we didn't. And there was a lot of mixed messages in the house and a lot of talks about, can we get enough money for you to go to college? Those conversations. But then I would see things that would dispute that feeling that my parents were giving to me or that I was taking from my parents. In addition to the fact.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off there, because their financial position doesn't really matter, in my opinion. Now, I might be incorrect, but what there was there would probably be psychological adversity in terms of financial insecurity.
Correct. I don't know if they had $100 or $1 million. I always felt like we didn't have money, but then they would do things that would show that we did have some money. And yeah, it was always I was very unsure where we stood.
Okay, so going forward, you wanted to ensure that you had stability, which is probably why you followed the career you did. and that is a good example for me of there was adversity. And to me, that's in a sense psychological adversity in terms of financial security, not knowing if it's there or not,
Right.
which you turned into a strength because you were like, I am going to make sure that I am always going to bring home the bacon. We're going to be stable.
Yes.
We're going to
Yes.
be fine.
Yes. I
And
think there's another piece if you want to, go back to that childhood thing. I think I always wanted to have paid employment because it was always important for me from watching my extended family that I never had to depend on somebody else for my livelihood. I wanted to be out there and be able to earn enough money that I could do safely and comfortably what I wanted to achieve in life.
on that note, I've got a time machine. It's not great, but it will allow you to go back and talk to yourself at any point in time in your past. You get 30 seconds to a minute at most. Give yourself a piece of advice.
I think I would go back to 8th grade and I would tell myself that this isn't a lifelong make it or break it set of years. This is a lifelong place to learn and fail. I didn't do the failing part. I did the learning part, and therefore I hadn't done the failing part, and that would have been much more valuable in the long run.
Okay, learning to fail and get back up. All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. You've been awesome today, but I have one last question for you, as I always.
Whatever you want.
As
I'm
I
half
always.
dressed on your behalf.
Coming out of COVID-19, I figure maybe there's a good 60 days left of decent imbalance, and then we'll start to find some ground. It's not going to be fully open. It's not going to be a return to normal. Understandable. What's your plan?
What's the plan for after we're, quote, back to normal? I'm actually engaged right now with 3 potential clients, and the conversation is, pretend COVID didn't happen. Now what? Because it really is hard to plan with so much unknown about the length of the situation, the breadth and depth of the situation, as well as when treatments are going to be around, whether come next fall, we have another round of this. So there's a lot of unknowns, but if we could go back to X date before we ever heard of COVID-19, what would we do? And it's really about figuring out 2 things. Figuring out what the clients would be doing if it never happened, and press on. What are your business objectives? Who are you gonna engage with? What would be the plan if we could erase the whole thing? And then the second thing I try to get them to think about is, guess what? This thing happened. So now let's think about how the fact that this thing happened and may even still be happening, what are we going to do?
Okay, gotcha. All right. So put things in perspective first, on solid ground, if you like, then look at the variable. I did say it was my last question, but I've got your brain here and I love your brain, and I know you've done research and you've worked in different industries before. So I am going to pick one last thing out of it. And my opinion is the following, and I want your feedback on it. A lot of things have changed, but a lot of things haven't. And I think in a way that's part of your current approach with your clients. So what I'm going to ask you is, in terms of the dynamics going forward, what do you think hasn't changed? What are some of those anchor points that we can use? I know it's a heavy question, but what do you think are some of those anchor points that will remain the same regardless?
I think that the anchor points are a renewed interest in caring for your neighbor. Neighbor, not necessarily meaning the person living next door. We've seen so many cases of individuals, businesses, neighborhoods, houses of worship doing incredible, never thought it could be done work to help people they don't know. I would like to give a bit of credit to, believe it or not, you heard here first. I would like to give a little bit of credit to my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law we were on FaceTime with her because she's stuck in the house too. And she's a Holocaust survivor. She's written a book, she gives lectures, she teaches schools about the whole thing. And she said, I think I want to write another book. And I said, oh, what's that about? And she said, this COVID-19 is our Holocaust. And those medical professionals and bankers and grocery people and delivery people, those are our rescuers, just like I got rescued when the Holocaust happened.
If I'm understanding correctly, the anchor you are saying will remain is human nature and the good in a
No. I'm hoping it won't just remain, that it will remain at the level that we've gotten to during this time of stress.
Okay.
Increased caring about neighbors, increased caring about people we don't know, places we don't know, increased willingness, particularly on the corporate side, since that's my expertise, in, turning their factory into a mask making enterprise, which they're not. And the volunteers that we've seen come out for Hands On Atlanta, all their sister organizations all over the country through the Hands On Network. People are wanting to help, wanting to physically do, and you keep hearing it over and over again. We can't go out, but we want to help. And if we can keep that want to help part, as soon as we get the can't get out of the house part done, we could really move our whole, at least nation, if not the world, more forward.
The subject I care about most, that's kind of my thing, is positive significance. And that's how we can be of significance to each other in a positive way. And what you're saying is that light, that flame, is actually growing in people, in part by being separated from each other and having time to think about how interconnected we are. If the butterfly effect or the ripple effect ever came into focus, this would be a very good example how someone in another side of the world can have just one small outbreak can have a massive impact on the entire world, which I think we tend to overlook when it comes to the environment. We all contribute, we all get impacted.
Yes.
A little bit of contribution to pollution. When you add it all up together, we're ruining the planet, sadly.
For sure. I will say that at least the Atlanta metro area has the cleanest air quality we have had in modern time.
That's going to be very confusing when people walk back out into it.
It is.
You've been wonderful. Thank you for your time.
You have been wonderful and patient, and I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you too.